Everybody who's just tuning in, we're glad you're tuning in. We're about to start. Tonight's episode is Never Again Live with Meir. And we'll do a little intro for those of you just getting warmed up and getting next to your TV screens or your laptops or your computers or your cell phones, wherever you're watching us. Once again, welcome back to Never Again Live with Meir Halevi Weinstein. Go to israelnow.ca and join our fight against anti-Semitism. Our past episodes are available at israelnow.ca as well as on our YouTube channel or on our Facebook page, Never Again Live. A lot went on this week, which was culminated in what went on yesterday, which will be the emphasis of tonight's program. We'll have a couple of guests with us joining us. I'll be here in the studio back in South Texas, of all places, where all this excitement went on yesterday in the Texas area. We'll be talking about that shortly. Also joining us this evening will be Ron East. Ron is up in Canada, although he's from Jerusalem. He's an unapologetic Zionist and the founder and editor of the JCA, which is Compelling Jewish Media, and is Canada's main source for local, national, global, pro-Israel Jewish news. Yesterday, January 15th, 2022, we're all aware of things that were going on. The CAIR organization, the executives were calling for the targeting of synagogues, and we'll get to that video a little bit later. Zahra Bilu, who's the executive director in San Francisco of CAIR, basically said that Zionist synagogues and AIPAC and every other basically Jewish organization is responsible for Islamophobia, as if the terrorists who go and blow up places and attempt to kill people and take hostages are not responsible for Islamophobia. Just imagine if yesterday's incident was a white man walking into a black church. It would be white supremacy all over the news. But today what we're reading about is international extremism without a word of Islamofascist terrorism. At the same time this was going on, back in my home country of Texas, we call it a country, although we're the great state of Texas, the CAIR of Texas, which by the way in the past was affiliated with the Holy Land Foundation, which was convicted of financing terrorism, and they're based in Dallas as well, not too far from yesterday's synagogue debacle. They were holding a campaign for the release of convicted terrorist Lady Al-Qaeda. So while somebody's getting ready to hold hostages in a synagogue, they're trying to get a terrorist released. In fact, his reason, he stated, for the hostage takeover was to help get her released. And there she is. She moved to Houston in 1990 on a student visa. And shortly after the time, she studied at Brandeis University. Brandeis was established in 1948 as a model of ethnic diversity. Remember, 1948, the Holocaust, just ashes were still in the sky. We were still gathering the dead, and we could not get into many Ivy League universities because of quotas. So we established our own Jewish university with the purpose of ethnic diversity and religious diversity. And that's where Miss Al-Qaeda went and got her graduate degrees.
The governor of Ghazni at the time of Dr. Siddiqui's arrest said they'd received a tip-off about a woman with a young boy who was planning a suicide attack in the city.
And they're claiming that she's innocent, although she was caught red-handed with maps, with diagrams, and with explosives.
When she was arrested, Dr. Siddiqui was carrying a large amount of explosives and had detailed maps of the main mosque in the city and the governor's own house. Dr. Usman said she had intended to commit suicide with her adopted son. He said he was shocked after seeing the age of the boy and cried at the time.
Her second husband, by the way, after abandoning her first husband with her 3 children, his uncle was the mastermind of 9/11. I think Brandeis needed to do a little more investing as to who they're accepting into the Jewish university. So yesterday, there were Shabbat services being held, both in the synagogue as well as via Zoom due to the persistence of the pandemic fears. And during Shabbat services, apparently somebody came to the door claiming that he needed some place to be. He may have been a homeless man, so they let him in. I think unfortunately for him, fortunately for the rest of us, he probably chose the wrong state and the wrong synagogue. A coordinated effort of local police, of the state troopers, the Department of Public Safety, of the FBI, of national teams got together and formulated a plan over a 10-hour period. There were almost 200 law enforcement officials in the area shortly after the incident began. And as we know, to rush to the end and cut to the chase, it ended in all hostages being unharmed, and the suspect himself, again, I wouldn't call him a suspect, I would call him the hostage taker or the terrorist, although the media is not going to call him a terrorist, nor will they even claim that he's Islamic. So what do we call this in retrospect? This yesterday's incident was a crisis in Texas, and which resolved in Texas style. I got to say that anybody who's listening who may think I'm being comical, this is not comical, this is not funny, this is satire at best. Once again, all the hostages were released, and the perpetrator is now dead. We like to call ourselves the Lone Star State or the other Lone Star State. Of course, Israel has its Masada, we have our Alamo. And the way we'll deal with terrorists.
Go ahead. Make my day.
And with our law enforcement team, the Texas Rangers, we have our own Ranger Walker. Ranger, take it away.
American, I want to negotiate. Do you hear me, American?
Loud and clear.
Sorry, I couldn't resist. Again, this is satire, not comedy. Please don't confuse the two. This is very meaningful to me. I'm in South Texas. I'm presently the president of Temple B'nai Israel in South Texas, a congregation established in 1849. And next year, we're celebrating the 100th anniversary of our little temple in South Texas. My 3 daughters were bat mitzvahed at this temple. My mother's memorial service was held at this temple. And one night we had Shabbat services at our own temple. We all went to sleep. The next morning we got up for Sunday school and we approached the building. And this is what we were greeted by. Heil Hitler, swastikas, and fuck the Jews painted on our little 100-year-old temple in South Texas. So again, anti-Semitism in Texas is not new, but we don't tolerate it. The perpetrator of this crime was convicted of a hate crime and is spending 20 years in prison. So, a word from our sponsor, the concealed carry talit bag. Don't leave home without it. And that's no joke. Learn to protect yourself. We love law enforcement. We support law enforcement, but sometimes you can't depend on them because they're not there and you are. So learn to defend yourself. Fortunately, yesterday's temple in the Dallas area, they were trained. They had training on how to deal with a hostage situation. And we don't know the specifics yet, but certainly that had an effect on the final outcome of the incident. And I'd like to say at the beginning of each episode, to quote Albert Einstein, the world is a dangerous place, not because of those who do evil, but because of those who look on and do nothing. Please join us at israelnow.ca. Help us, support us, join us, share us, and join in the conversation. And on that note, Meir, take it away.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to ask everyone who's joining us tonight if you could please share this, share the link on your various pages that you're part of on social media, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. We'd appreciate it. We want to reach as many people as we can. The Jewish community is going through a very difficult time, Jewish community in diaspora. As every week, we start off with a recap of the Parsha. There are lessons in the Parsha, and there certainly is a lesson in this Parsha as well. This Parsha, and I'm going to be very direct, right to the point. No pie in the sky. This Parsha is Parsha's Bashalach. And what happens at this Parsha? Well, this is where the Jewish people left Egypt and crossed through the sea. The Jewish people were leaving Egypt, and pursuing them were the Egyptians. And they reached the sea, and God said to go forward. But there was apprehension. There was fear. They didn't know what to think. It says, the rabbis say they broke into 4 camps, and I'm sure there are spin-offs of these camps with all kinds of rationales. What do we do now? We see the Egyptians pursuing us on chariots, and what's going to happen? We left Egypt, now we're just going to drop dead here. And there was one Jew that listened to the command from God to go forward. His name was Nachshon ben Aminadab. He jumped into the water. He kept walking and walking until the water reached up to his nose, it says. And at that point, the sea parted. You have to take action. The sea parted, and the Jewish people crossed in the middle of the sea on dry land. They made it to the other side. The Egyptians continued to pursue the Jewish people. And God performed another miracle where once the Jewish people made it to the other side, God collapsed the waters on the Egyptians, and the Egyptians drowned to death. The Jewish people, it says the Jewish people had to be certain that the Egyptians died. So they went to the shore to even inspect, and the Jewish people had dogs with them. And when they saw that a body of an Egyptian soldier, anti-Semite, is dead, that the dog would pounce on that Egyptian. So we're waiting for the day when God will perform a miracle in our times and decimate the anti-Semites, as there are so many of them today. But until that happens, until he collapses the sea, so to speak, on them, we have to take action, and there's a lot of action we have to take. And we're going to be speaking about the incident that happened in Texas, hostage situation. A Muslim travels from the UK, from Britain, to go to the United States, goes to this particular synagogue on Shabbat, takes the rabbi and some other congregants hostage, demands from the rabbi to call another rabbi in New York City to use that rabbi's influence on the United States government influence to release a terrorist that's being held in prison for serious, major serious terrorism offenses, as our doctor in the studio showed a short video clip already of what she was involved with, what kind of terrorism. And where does this Muslim terrorist who held the Jews hostage in the synagogue in Texas have it in his mind contact a rabbi in New York to use influence? Where do they learn this, that Jews have influence of government, or Jews run the show, or the Zionists run the show? We're going to be discussing that tonight as well, because this myth and this level of anti-Semitism is being spread by major Islamic organizations such as CAIR. We're going to be talking about CAIR tonight as well. The buildup this week before this even occurred in the synagogue in Texas, we were focusing on a BDS organization, Samadon, that they held an event in Vancouver in a church of all places, that the leader of Samadon, and by the way, Samadon has been designated by the government of Israel as a terrorist organization, as a front for the Popular Front for Palestine, the PFLP. He made a clear public statement that he compares the Israelis with the Nazis. And he's speaking in a church. How does this happen? After the Holocaust, after Auschwitz, after everything the Jewish people have been through, to be given a platform in a church to speak such anti-Semitic garbage and make this comparison. The federal government of Canada and the provincial government and municipal governments have adopted the CAIR definition of anti-Semitism, which makes it very clear that comparing Israel to Nazi Germany is pure anti-Semitism. But anyways, common sense says that as well, and that this church is not using their common sense, and they're providing a platform for him. So we're going to be getting into that. We have the short clip that we're going to show of him as well. And also in the week, Omar Barghouti, the founder of the BDS, he makes a statement this week. It's on social media. He's interviewed. He defines what a Jew is. He defines that, according to him, a Jew has no connection to Israel and should never have any connection to Israel, and should never be granted, and the Jewish people should never be granted any kind of sovereignty. This kind of anti-Semitism, this is the BDS. The BDS, Jews are Nazis. The BDS, Jews have no right to sovereignty. The BDS, Jews or Zionists control the world, control governments. And that's why a Muslim would go into this synagogue in Texas and take Jews hostage and hope that the Jews could use their influence on the government of the United States to free this convicted terrorist. This is what we're dealing with. I think we have Ron Easton with us tonight. Is he on right now? Let me just see if he's on. We'll get into this discussion.
Well, it seems that his camera is on, but I'm watching his desk. So I think he may be finishing the ball game. but I'll text them and find what's going on. Okay.
Okay, can we show the video of the Samadon and also of the of Omar Barghouti?
Okay. Let me bring those up for you.
Okay.
Let's see. Well, how about the Nazis are identical to Zionists? That one's
That's
right
some of
here.
it.
So let's show that first. And then, so here, let's start with this.
The Israelis and the Nazis are almost identical in terms of the way they look at the victim. The method that guides the Zionist movement and Israel is that less Arabs and more land. We need to grab as much land as we can and displace as much Arabs as we can. And that's why they call Palestinian babies a demographic bombs. These are bombs, and we need to limit Palestinians from having more children, and they actually sponsor programs targeting Palestinian women that maybe you should not, give birth to many children because this hurts you as a woman. And we will fight until the liberation of Palestine and the Palestinian people, no matter how long this fight is going to take.
So there you go.
There you have it.
Jews are Nazis, and Jews are monitoring Arab birth rates in the territories or in Israel. It's complete nonsense. It's complete nonsense. And it's incitement because it's just not true. It's not true at all. There's a very important other video that we have to put together with this, and that was the CAIR official from San Francisco, Zahra Billoo. She went on record saying to target Zionist synagogues and Zionist organizations are the enemy. This is CAIR. So we have this video to show that we have it right there up on the screen. This is very important.
We need to pay attention to the Zionist synagogues. We need to pay attention
hear it.
to Hillel chapter.
It's not much volume, so maybe you can turn your volumes up. It's on, but the video itself is lacking volume.
They have your
Is
back
it?
when it comes to human rights.
Yeah.
So oppose
Let me see.
the vehement fascists, but oppose the polite Zionists too. They are not your friends. They will not be there for you either. They will take.
I'll tell you what, Ron East is here. Let me let him talk and see if I can find another copy.
Okay, that's fine.
So without any further ado, let's welcome Ron to the show.
Talk to them about what is happening in Palestine. And see
Ron,
if
how you doing?
conversation-
Good. How you doing, Meir? Sorry about the delay, but oops, I can't see myself. There we go.
There you
Sorry about the delay, but there was a very intense game between my favorite team, the 49ers, and the Cowboys, and my team came out on the upper hand in the last second. So very
Oh, there
excited.
you go.
So
Yeah.
my apologies. Listen,
Sweat.
what happened yesterday was something that you and I have spoken about, I think, on the show many times, and warned that this is down the rabbit hole we're going, so to speak. And what's amazing is that this person chose to go to a synagogue that's a Reform synagogue that's actually anti-Israel in many ways and pro-Palestinian, and it just shows you that a Jew is a Jew is a Jew. In the end of the day, these people don't know how to differentiate between a pro-Israel Jew or an anti-Zionist Jew or an independent Jewish Voices Jew or a Jewish Voices for Peace Jew, or if not now Jew. They have no idea. Nobody is wearing a title on them of what type of Jew we are. So in the end of the day, a Jew is a Jew, and if it says Beth Israel, it's good enough. Anyways,
And then he calls on the rabbi of that synagogue to make a phone call to a rabbi in New York
In New York.
to use that rabbi's influence over the U.S. government influence to
And they want
free
to,
the terrorists.
and they're trying to tell us that this person, this is a result of some mental illness.
Yeah.
He had this very well coordinated and worked out. I mean, the man had to buy a ticket in England
Mm-hmm.
and fly out of England to Texas, arrive in Texas, find his way to Collinville, stay in Collinville. Apparently, from what I read, find somebody in Collinville you can buy a gun from on the streets. So you had to come with cash, purchased a gun on the streets.
Yep.
And then, he went and found, the one target that he knew would make headlines, and that's a Jewish institution on a Sabbath. If you really didn't want to target Jews, why didn't you wait till Sunday and, go right across the street to the Catholic Church, and take the Catholics in the church hostages? If it really wasn't about Jews, if it wasn't anti-Semitism, why pick the Shabbat? Why pick a Jewish synagogue? And this argument that the synagogue was on the way from the airport doesn't hold water because the man stayed for at least a day, or if not more, in Collinville looking for and purchasing that particular weapon.
And why would he want to contact this particular rabbi in New York, that the rabbi has an influence over the U.S. government policy? Where does he come up with these? Where does this conspiracy theory of Jews come from?
Who aided him? Who abated him? Who provided him, if it's not monetary funding, then provided him physical, funding or physical encouragement, or helped him along the way, whether it's purchasing his ticket, whether it's getting to the States, whether it's where to find the gun, whatever the case might be. Somebody was educating him, influencing him, whatever you want to call it. And I think it's very important for the FBI to get to the bottom of who those people are that influenced him. And listen, at the same time as all this was going on, I'm not sure if you mentioned already on the show, CAIR was holding, an event, to raise awareness and to demand for the release of this.
I was going to bring that up. Go ahead, describe it.
Yeah,
get into it.
Yeah, they were actually holding, a virtual online event, and I think even a in-person event where they were going to demand in DC. And maybe also in Texas, I believe, because that's where she's being held, and demanding that she be released, that she somehow has been wrongly convicted, wrongly held, and that this is, she's a casualty of the war on terror. In some respects, some people are saying she's a casualty of the Israeli influence. And if you look at her background, she's called the Lady of Al-Qaeda. If you look at her husband, who she's now divorced from, but if you just take a Google search of who her husband was, detained in Guantanamo Bay, for the same reasons, he aided and abetted the people who perpetrated 9/11. He helped with funding and funneling it. These are not nice people.
Right.
And
let me
guy,
just cut in for a second. Somebody just posted in the comments here in the chat. And the rabbi he wanted to speak to is Angela W. Bakhdahi. I don't know who it is, but if anybody out there watching has any information, we'd like to know what organizations she's affiliated with. We'd like to know more information about her. Go ahead, Ron. Go on.
Yeah, so it's just amazing, that at the same time as this was happening, as the hostage situation was taking place at the synagogue, and parallel to it, there was an event taking place asking for the release of this woman. Now, you could tell me this is just a coincidence, and could very well be that it was just a coincidence. But how amazing that those two things happen exactly at the same time, and on the same day. Somebody influenced him, and we need to know who's the person that influenced him, because those people are dangerous people.
And we have Zahra Ballou. We discussed her on a previous show a couple of times, where we have the video, so our doctor in the studio will find a better quality that has louder sound, but where she was talking about targeting Zionist synagogues. And she is the CAIR rep director for San Francisco. She was not thrown out of the organization. She was not denounced by CAIR. This is what they believe. And that synagogue was targeted.
Now, Mayor, last time I did a Google search of synagogues, I didn't see them, lineated according to their Zionist
Right.
beliefs or how Zionist they are. So,
Right.
it's a nice play of words to say, Zionist
Mhm.
synagogues are not our friends, but
Right.
people have no clue, just like I said at the beginning, from one
Sure.
synagogue from another. So she's in actually, it's a broad umbrella of all synagogues, and that's why a synagogue like this, was attacked. A synagogue that actually, in many ways would be in favor of some of the beliefs of this person held, vis-a-vis the Israel-Palestinian conflict. So
Right.
it's very, very alarming for Jews. And I think the Jews on the left, those on the progressive side, on the woke side, need to have a wake-up call from this. No Jew is safe out there. And if you believe that if you march hand in hand down the street with a pro-Palestinian cause, that somehow the next day your synagogue, your shul, your place of worship, your place of safety is going to be safe, you're mistaken. You're mistaken. They wouldn't care. They would not care one iota.
I've had some Jews who are with the BDS as a result of the latest hostage situation. They've actually messaged me, reached out to me. They want to turn a new leaf in their life, and they're informing on the BDS organizations that they're with. So we're calling on more. If you're Jewish, actually anyone who's with the BDS, but if you're Jewish especially, contact us. We'll help you get right out of it, and we need the information from you. We want to bring down the BDS. That's what we want to do. We
We
want
want your safety at the end of the day,
imploded. Yes.
Yeah, and we want your safety. You're in danger as much as every other Jew is in danger.
Yep.
And we're here, to help any Jew out there who wants to help, and recognize after this event, that it's time, for Jews to unite and come under one umbrella. And
So here's some
there is-
information.
go
Rabbi
ahead.
Angela Warnick Bookdare serves as a senior rabbi of Central Synagogue in New York City and is the first woman to lead the Central Reforms congregation in its 180-year history. Rabbi Bookdahi first joined the Central Synagogue as senior cantor in 2006. In 2014, she was chosen by the congregation to be senior rabbi. That's somebody just shared that information on the chat. Listen, the chat's very active today. Anyone has any information they want to share with us, or also if you have any questions, post it. We will address it. Myself and Ron will address it as best as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I'm just going to Google this lady to see. Yeah, I know exactly who this rabbi is. She's a lady of Asian descent. I think I mentioned to you. Yeah, there she is.
I think so. Yes, there
she is. I mentioned to you that that I saw her, a show about her and her synagogue. Actually, her synagogue is the largest synagogue in New York.
And I think she had something to say. She's like right on the left or something.
That synagogue itself is a progressive synagogue. But what's interesting about that synagogue is that there's a waiting list of people to buy into the synagogue, to get membership in a synagogue. And in fact, even the Israeli consulate and the Israeli ambassador to the UN and to the, attend that particular synagogue. Because if you want to meet the who's who in New York, that's the synagogue you go to. So she is indeed very influential, and she does have the ear of very high up people because of the synagogue itself and how, So interesting that he wanted to reach out to her again. Who told him about it? Who gave him her, line? Who told him that she has that influence? Who directed him? Somebody gave him that information. A mentally ill person wouldn't on their own be able to.
And that's how they're presenting it. That he was, he's mentally ill.
But that's lately how they present most terrorists who, do some kind of a terror attack. It must be mentally ill, because a normal person, wouldn't do it. So let's just put the label of mental illness on it, and it makes it less harmful. Then you can say there was nothing against Jews. It wasn't anti-Semitic. The man just had one thing that he cared about, and that's, to release or to free this lady. If that's really all he cared about, he could have gone anywhere. He could have gone to a restaurant. He could have gone to any other establishment and made his cause known if it was a singular cause like the FBI wants us to believe. There's some kind of a fear out there to say the word anti-Semitism, Because if you're going to say the word anti-Semitism and it relates to somebody of a Muslim background, it somehow people feel they need to right away add also the word Islamophobia.
Right.
You know, you can no longer have anti-Semitism on its own, because as Bernie Farber made it clear, you know, on the left, you know, it's only political anti-Semitism. It's not violent anti-Semitism.
Yeah, right. We were just talking about that a couple of shows ago. That and exactly, maybe we have that video still around that we could show the absolute nonsense that he said.
Yeah,
His greatest fear that he said is waking up that a white supremacist neo-Nazi will go into a synagogue and hold Jews hostage there. Here we have a Muslim storming into a synagogue, heavily armed, bombs, everything, in a synagogue.
Yeah.
In a synagogue. And where does he get that idea to go into a synagogue? Because, like I said, the major Islamic organizations, they talk about our synagogues. They do. Zahra Balou, she was very clear about it. That was anti-Semitism. Nothing happened to her. Nothing happened.
Sabbatical.
Not only does nothing happen to her, but in Bernie Farber's group, someone he praises, Amir Agawabi, who's with the Canadian Race Relations Agency, that she was at conferences taking pictures together with Zahra Balou. And I've called on her to condemn Zahra Balou for her statement. She has not said anything, and Bernie Farber doesn't call her out. What gives? So it's a legitimization of this. And, don't call us anti-Semites. Don't call us anti-Semites. What are you talking about? This is anti-Semitism. This is vicious. This is vile anti-Semitism. And this is not going to be the first and the last storming of a synagogue, unfortunately. This is the tip of the iceberg.
You know what's interesting also, Meir, is if you were following some of the major news outlets out there, for example, Reuters and others, CAIR came out fairly early on, about an hour into the situation, with a statement that they condemn this and they condemn attacks against Jews and anti-Semitism. It's interesting that they condemn this, and I'm going to put their condemnation in quotation marks, yet we haven't heard one condemnation from them of this Zahra lady out of San Francisco who spewed such anti-Semitic, hate, and perhaps fueled a person like this to act the way he did. It's very disingenuous of them, to come out with a statement condemning this, when it's an arm's length or 2 arms length away from them, and yet have no guts and no forthright, to condemn Zahra for what she did and for the words that she spewed, and for how those words could have led to this particular incident and hostage taking.
Absolutely. We have another video, a short clip of Omar Barghouti, the founder of the BDS, and he is defining what it means to be Jewish and what claims Jews have to sovereignty. If our doctor in the studio could show that video, there you go. They're defining what it means to be Jewish. We can't define what it means to be Jewish. Jewish law means nothing, according to them. They will tell us our place in the world. They will tell us what we're worth. They'll tell us how much we're allowed to speak. They'll tell us what the definition of the Torah is and what pages to rip out and what pages to keep. So if our doctor in the studio could hear us, I don't know if he can.
I can hear you.
Okay, if you could, or Barghouti, that video. This is.
That's the one you just sent me.
Yeah.
So let's see if I can.
An interesting way to. Oh, there we go.
Okay, you guys keep chatting, and I'm going to see if I can. The problem is the sound, but I'll get it. You all keep chatting. I'm sure you'll find something to talk about while I try to get the sound working on that one.
Okay, so let's see. So somebody, the chat's very active. It's very interesting. Someone just says, January 3rd, a gentleman named Mohammed Hassani assaulted a Sikh taxi driver in New York City while screaming ethnic insults at him for some reason. Most of the info on this is from sources in India. Okay, I don't know.
I'm not
We're
sure
talking about what's
that,
going on about affecting the Jewish community. A lot of people get affected with all kinds of things, but
Meir, and one thing that we spoke about, off air, I think last night, and I mentioned to you was, that I think if you look at the CIA or FBI statistics, they mentioned that they believe that within the Muslim world, there's about 10%, maybe 20, depending what you read, that they consider to be extremists, people that would be dangerous, to not only Muslims in their own land, but would be dangerous also to the Western world. And as I mentioned to you yesterday, 10%, that might not seem like a lot. But when you think of a country like Canada, which might have now 400,000, maybe a bit less, 300,000, people of Muslim background who've come in from all the different Muslim countries. And if you take just 10% of those people, as being extremists, as if you do just the average, from 30,000 people, from 300,000 people, that's 30,000 people that potentially could be dangerous and extremists, that are, not only endangering, us and our society, but also endangering, the Muslim society itself. Because part of the problem that the Muslim society has is that there are people from within that society that are causing these awful, terrible events to happen. And when these events happen, it tarnishes, those Muslims out there who are on the moderate side or who want to be on the moderate side. I think this is as much a call to action for the Muslim community. They need to stand up. They need to, just like you and I spoke about, rooting out those from within our own community who, stand against our community. And, those independent Jewish voices, if not now, the Muslim community has got to be willing and able to do that same kind of work. They got to look deep inside and understand and figure out and know who are those people that are endangering their community and the safety of their community. Because when these kind of activities happen, when these kind of actions are taken, it doesn't only threaten us as Jews, it threatens them as Muslims as well. And
hey, I got that video when you guys want it. Keep talking. But I just want to make a quick comment about what you all were saying. Bush Sharif was interviewed when he was still running Pakistan, and he was insulted that somebody said there are a lot of Islamo-fascist terrorists. So his answer, I think, was naive. He said he feels it's only around 2% of all Muslims. Well, do the math. 1.8 billion Muslim, 2%, that's almost 20 million terrorists, which Musharraf, who's pro-Islamic, kind of admitted. That means there are 20 million terrorists in the world, according to Musharraf. Without any further ado, let's play this video you all been waiting for, which I have not only the picture, but the sound. And here.
Arab culture is not understood in the narrow ethnic sense. It includes Kurdish and Amazigh and Jewish. So celebrating the Jewish component in Arab culture is something not just we accept, we call for, we advocate, we are proud of that heritage. But no one should confuse Jewishness with Israeliness and Zionism. Jewish culture is part of Arab culture, yes, in the Arab region, but Israel cannot be, as a settler colonial apartheid state, cannot be a normal part of this region. This is not about Jewish Arab culture. No, it's about an attempt to normalize Israel's Zionization and Israelization of Jewish Arab culture. Trying to say Moroccan Jews are Israeli, they're part of Israel. No, they're Moroccan Jews. It's part of Moroccan history, which is part of the Arab region. It's not Israeli. You're a state that did not exist 74 years ago.
Former Interior Minister of Israel, former Interior Minister of Israel in previous government, called for, this guy is an Israeli citizen, apparently. He went to, he married an Israeli Arab, married. And he was able to obtain citizenship in Israel. He went to Israeli universities.
Yeah.
And all he does is incite against Israel and call for the destruction of the Jewish state. And there you are with his classic anti-Semitism. I don't know why. I don't know what gives with those who legislate in Israel that they can't strip his citizenship and you're out. Like I don't really like speaking out against policies in Israel because we're not there yet. But I mean, we do have the definition of anti-Semitism. We do support Israel. We want Israel, and Here you have somebody that's going around the world inciting against Israel, inciting against Jews, and he holds Israeli citizenship. It's outrageous. It's completely outrageous.
Meir, it's what we spoke about also before, about the whole idea that they understand the weaknesses within the democracy, and they understand how to use those, what we would consider to be, rights and of freedoms that we would secure to ourselves for positive things. They use those weaknesses within the system, and which allows them to do the things they do. That's what allows Afiraz al-Najim in Canadian Defense of Human Rights, to stand outside in Toronto and call for the destruction and death of Israelis and U.S. citizens under freedom of speech. And that's what allows a person like that to hold Israeli citizenship. Listen, we saw what happened in the hospital when, with the Palestinian flags, with our friend who was on a hunger strike for 140 days, Palestinian flags within Israeli hospitals, Palestinian flags at Tel Aviv University, Palestinian flags in Haifa, in Akko. You see them, everywhere nowadays in Israel. It's become almost a, not worth fighting type of a situation unless there's cameras around, and then it becomes not nice. So the police will go and pull the flag. Before we go on, I just want to say something about what our wonderful friend here, Barghouti, was saying. When he's trying to claim that Jewish heritage is part of Arab culture, and Moroccan Jews are actually Moroccan Arab, it's the Arab culture. We can talk a little bit what happened to Jews in the Arab world. We can talk about the pogroms. We can talk about the killings and the murders and the rapes, and then why Moroccan Jews today call Israel home, and why Yemenite Jews call Israel today home, and Iraqi Jews and Iranians and Syrians and Jordanians, they call Israel home because of the terrible and vile, vicious attacks that they had to endure in their own countries because of the creation of the state of Israel. They didn't choose to leave their homes and go to Israel. They were forced out of their homes and forced to go to Israel, and they made a new home for themselves in Israel. And yes, Israel is their home. And whether you're a Jew out of Morocco or a Jew out of Poland or a Jew out of South Africa or a Jew out of Canada, you're a Jew. And it makes no difference where you are. You might be an Arab, who is Jewish, but it's not the other way around. It's always fascinating how they all forget that the Judaism came before, Islam and before Christianity. They forget that part of it. They forget the hundreds of years that went in between, the development of these religions, to somehow come and say that somehow Arabism came before Judaism. It's just fascinating. Fascinating.
Absolutely. Listen, I just got the signal from our doctor in the studio that we do have the video of Zahra Ballou from CAIR. Now, this is really important because there's a Canadian angle to it. There's an American, obviously embraced by major Islamic organizations. And that's where the thinking is for this terrorist who went into the synagogue. That's the justification.
And here we go.
We need to pay attention to the Anti-Defamation League. We need to pay attention to the Jewish Federation. We need to pay attention to the Zionist synagogues. We need to pay attention to the Hillel chapters on our campuses, because just because they're your friend today doesn't mean that they have your back when it comes to human rights. So oppose the vehement fascists, but oppose the polite Zionists too. They are not your friends. They will not be there for you when you need them. They will take your friendship and throw your Palestinian brothers and sisters under the bus. Oh, you get along because you're all in Girl Scouts together? Talk to them about what is happening in Palestine and see how that conversation goes. And so when we think about Islamophobia and Zionism, let's be clear about the connections. There is no difference between domestic policy and foreign policy when it comes to our human rights. There is no difference between domestic policy and foreign policy when it comes to those who seek to target us. And by the way, you should be a monthly donor to American Muslims for Palestine. Build it into your budget and forget about it. Make it your monthly contribution because you're contributing to the apartheid monthly. It is a part of your budget. You are paying your taxes, so you should be giving money to AMP monthly. Know, list goes on. Know who is on your side. Build community with them. Because the next thing I'm going to tell you is to know your enemies. And I'm not going to sugarcoat that. They are your enemies. There are organizations and infrastructures out there who are working to harm you. Make no mistake of it. They would sell you down the line if they could. And they very often do behind your back. I mean the Zionist organizations. I mean the foreign policy organizations who say they're not Zionists but want a two-state solution. I'm not a Palestinian myself, but it's my understanding that that is laughable. So know your enemies.
Know your enemies.
Now, one thing she said also, right at the end, she said she's not Palestinian. Let that resonate. Let that sink in. Because what they do, the organization she's with, CAIR, and a multitude of other Islamic organizations, the membership of those organizations represent Muslims or Arabs from all over the place. And the slogan that was being chanted in Toronto at the TDSB by the BDS group that went to a public school and want to make BDS part of the curriculum, they chanted, "By the millions, by the billions, we are all Palestinians." They want Israel destroyed. They don't care if they were born there or have any biological connection to that area there. Their biological connection is to somewhere else. It could be Saudi Arabia, it could be Syria, it could be Lebanon, it could be Yemen, it could be, you name it. They have some kind of irrational fixation with the Jews and Israel, and they want it gone. And that's what we're facing. And that's why a Muslim entered a synagogue this Shabbat, the most left-wing Reform synagogue probably in the States, entered it. The rabbi's on record even making statements against Israel. He's made some statements. Anyways, he targeted a synagogue because this is the language they hear from their community leaders representing groups such as CAIR. CAIR legitimizes this anti-Semitism. And until you'll get people like Bernie Farber, former CEO of the Canadian Jewish Congress, to speak out and not sugarcoat it, we have infighting problems in our community. But as a result of what just happened this past Shabbat, many Jews in the United States and in Canada are going to be thinking twice about going to the synagogue because of their fear for their safety. We saw this in May when the war happened, Israel and Hamas, that Jews were being attacked sitting in patios at restaurants. Cars were driving into their communities, threatening Jews. In London, England, there was convoy for Palestine, vehicles driving in the streets of London, England, on loudspeakers. F the Jews, rape Jewish women, beat the rabbis. Where do they learn this? Where do they get it from? We know where they get it from. Ron, join me.
You know, one of the other things, you know, that she was saying that when we were listening, though, that's interesting to note is that, you know, that she claims that the two-state solution is a laughable solution. And that has a big meaning as to, you know, where her position is and their vis-a-vis where CAIR's position would be on the whole idea of a two-state solution. If they find the two-state solution laughable, then the only solution that remains is that the state of Israel would, cease to exist as a Jewish state. And that's a big statement that was made there, and was kind of, glossed over. But I think it's important. Listen, I think that you're absolutely right. There are going to be many Jews out there who are going to be afraid to return to their synagogues in the next few weeks. But I think that, quite the opposite needs to happen. You don't cower in front of terrorists. You don't fear in front of people who do these types of things. You show up en masse and you show that we are resilient. And, like Menachem Begin said, we're not the Jews with quivering, feet anymore, knees. We are strong Jews and we are determined Jews. I'll tell you a quick story. When I was very young, I was maybe 10 years old. My father was the commanding officer of the South Lebanon security zone. And he called my mother one day when we were home and he said to her, quickly, bring the kids over to the headquarters. And I wanted to see something. My mom put us in the car, drove us to the headquarters, brought us up into this room, opened the door, and against the wall, there was 3 men handcuffed, blindfolded. My father said, those 3 were just captured. They're terrorists. Go touch them. I was terrified. I was a 9-year-old kid, terrorists. You think they're these monsters, right? I was absolutely terrified. My father said, go touch them. And he pushed us, and then when I went and I put my finger on one of the terrorists, he got so frightened that he peed his pants. And my father said to me, you see, they're human beings just like you and me. You don't run away and you don't fear them. And from that day, I learned, from my father something. Yeah, these are evil and terrible people. But what you don't do is you don't run away from these type of people. You confront them, you meet them head on, and you do tell them, and you be determined on the fact, that you are proud of who you are. You're proud of your Judaism. Listen, I want to do a march here back in Winnipeg, when COVID allows us to one of the major synagogues here to show them that we do not have fear. We will not fear them. You will not come into a synagogue, and instill fear in us Jews. The Holocaust will never happen again. And we say never again, we mean never again. And part of meaning never again is not cowering in our homes, not closing our windows, not putting our heads in the sand, and not continuing on with our daily lives. Listen, the best answer, Meir, you and I have always talked about is to make Aliyah to Israel. That is the best answer for every Jew out there today. But if you can't make Aliyah to Israel, if you're not able to do it, be a proud Jew. Be a proud Jew. Go to synagogue.
Let me add to what you said about Aliyah. So, ultimately, absolutely. But here's the deal, too. Something that many Jews should start thinking about also in a very serious way. Obtain dual citizenship in Israel. And if you could swing it, not everybody can, but if you could swing it, that you could still maintain your business and maintain everything, but a certain segment of your life is going to be in Israel instead of some other place that you would have been going to. Get that Israeli citizenship. You're going to help immensely the state of Israel that way as well. And, one day you will spend a lot more time in Israel. Also, you have the snowbirds that leave, let's say, from Canada or from wherever, that like to spend the winters in Florida, or as an example. Make the change. Do it. Get dual citizenship and do it in Israel. Spend your winters there. There's a lot of places in Israel that are definitely affordable. We've had a show about that before. We should have more shows about that, in fact. And spend your winters in Israel, and you'll be helping Israel. You'll be helping yourself, and that's again. This is not the complete solution, but this is thinking a little bit outside the box. For those who, they say, I can't make Aliyah. Okay, so you can't do a full, but you could do something. You can make your contribution that way. And we got to start thinking as a community outside of the box, because the anti-Semitism is growing, and it's growing primarily because of the immigration policy, bringing in Muslims from countries that teach in a very serious way anti-Semitism. And when you're going to have a segment coming into our countries that have that belief, it's going to take years to rectify that. And if in the process of trying to rectify that and assimilate into, let's say, Canadian society or the United States American society, that you have a backlash from BDS organizations saying, we want the curriculum to be BDS, then you got that much more of an obstacle. And therefore, and that population there that believes in that and is against our community is growing even larger. Put your sights on Israel. Start considering other ways to do it. Whether it's what I suggested, dual citizenship. It's open, it's available for you. You can do it painless. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, Meir, you were talking about immigration, and one of the recent studies that I looked at, and you and I again spoke about it previously, is the fact that the Jewish population in Canada, is stable. If not stable, it's slightly declining. We used to be 1.1%, maybe a little bit more of the population of Canada.
Yeah.
Today, we're less than 1%. We're somewhere sitting at about 0.8 or something like that of 1%. And in about 10, 15, 20 years, we'll be 0.04 of 1%, of the total population of Canada. As the population continues to increase, we're not increasing as a community. And what that causes, that shift, it's not just a shift, in numbers. It's a shift in influence. It's a shift in how politics works in Canada. As more immigrants come into Canada from Muslim countries, and bring their own culture and ideas, and they become strong and united, and they start running people for government, there'll be a shift in the way the government sees and the actions the government has vis-a-vis towards Israel and towards Judaism. We've seen what happened in Europe. And Europe is the canary in the coal mine of what's coming our way. And again, we're not talking about, the Muslim community as a whole. That, I don't think you and I have ever made that kind of statement. But again, even if you take the doctors 2%, 400,000 of 500,000 people, you're left with several thousand people, who want, not the best interest for you. And that's very scary, because anti-Semitism is only going to continue to grow. And, maybe you're not looking, about yourself. Maybe you're at an age now where you say, what, I'm already at an age, it's not going to affect me that much. We got to think about the next generation, our children and our grandchildren. They're going to be the ones who are really going to have to face the real brunt of what's coming. This is a tsunami. We're still seeing it coming down the ocean. It hasn't hit, the shoreline yet, but it's coming. What we saw yesterday is like, the first signs of a tsunami, when the pieces of wood start coming onto the shore, and all that stuff. But the real wave is coming. And I'm not sure our community is prepared for that wave that is about to hit us. And part of the preparation is exactly what you were speaking about. Have an exit plan. It doesn't sound nice. It doesn't sound fun. Doesn't sound attractive. But you know what my kids learned at school, the first days at school? An exit plan from the house in case the house is on fire. How are you going to get out? Which window are you going to use? What door? How do you tell when it's hot? You know what? Our community needs the same thing about anti-Semitism. What is our exit plan? Which window are we going out of? What door are we going to exit? And how do we know when the house is on fire? Because I don't think we've done any of that homework as a community. We talk about it, but as a community, we haven't come together to discuss yet. What do we do? And I spoke to you about even the money that's being raised by federations. There needs to be a reshift and a rethinking about where is that money going? How are we utilizing it? And what is it doing for the short and long-term safety of our communities? It's time to stop building buildings on the names of people and start investing in our safety. Invest in the safety of the synagogues, not just, a few $1,000s, a real investment. Show the community that there's real leadership. We need leadership now more than ever.
Let me give you since we're coming to the end, but let me give some. We'll end on some optimism. We need something good. It's I mean, it's been a horrible week with especially with what happened yesterday, the hostage taking synagogue, which means any synagogue could be targeted. But and you mentioned the demographics where the Jewish community is getting smaller, and the Islamic community is definitely getting larger. And unfortunately, in the Islamic community, they embrace the BDS. They embrace that BDS anti-Semitism. But in Israel, there was over the weekend we learned that a major deal was signed, and the United States and Russia together were on it to apply some pressure on Lebanon to sign the deal with Israel, that Israel will supply gas to Lebanon. Now that's huge news. One, it will certainly add to Israel's ever-growing, vibrant, strong gross domestic product, which in 2021 was just over $450 billion. Yeah, the U.S. aid package of $3 billion really, it's a real threat to Israel if they say no. And they say that just by natural means, the end of the year 2022, we'll see over $500 billion the GDP for Israel. But anyways, tens of billions of dollars is going to be the result of this deal with Lebanon, this gas deal. And, I think your average Lebanese Muslim or Arab who wants to turn on the light switch in their homes or get some gas will not have the same horrible view of Israel after they get used to this, of getting gas from Israel. Hopefully this will lead to the demise and the implosion of Hezbollah, and we're looking at a new chapter for Israel, and hopefully for the Jewish people who will be attracted that much more to Israel. Wouldn't it be a wonderful thing if there could be down the road normalization between Israel and Lebanon, where we could travel from Israel to Lebanon and sit at a seaside cafe sipping a cappuccino?
Listen, Meir, Lebanon, the people of Lebanon are on their knees. Lebanon as a country is on its knees. They have no money, the infrastructure is ruined. Their politicians have stolen every penny they could. Hezbollah took whatever was left over, and people are lining up. There's no gas, there's no electricity. Anything they can get right now, is a savior for them. And Israel's come in again right at the right time, right at the right place to do the right thing again, and to provide help and aid to the Lebanese, with the idea and the hope that that aid to the Lebanese people will push the Lebanese people more and more to stand up against Hezbollah and to start to understanding the waste and destruction that Hezbollah has caused to Lebanon over the last, 3 to 4 decades, and what Lebanon could have been and what it should have been. Lebanon once had direct flights from Israel to Lebanon. The train went all the way to Lebanon. My wife's grandfather used to take the train all the time to Beirut, to Damascus. I just told you the other day about a story I read about an Israeli family out of the United States who are Syrians, who flew into Lebanon, hired rented a vehicle in Beirut, and drove from Beirut to Damascus. And they were saying, that everybody was friendly, everybody was courteous. People want, the average person you run into, again, it's not the, leadership or but the average person, that's what they want. They want that relationship. They want that peace. They see what's happening with Israel and the United Arab Emirates. They see what's happening with Israel and Morocco. They see what's happening with Israel and Sudan and other countries. And they want the same thing. They see the richness. They see the growth. They see the possibilities, the financial possibilities that such a relationship and peace will bring to them. And that's what they want. And about the $3 billion, listen, somebody needs to explain to people what that aid package really is. It's money that doesn't even come to Israel. It's money that stays in the United States and gets funneled into United States factories that produce the ammunition, the equipment, the vehicles, the planes that Israel then purchases from the United States. What it is really is an infusion of money into the United States economy to enable the people who work in the United States in these industries to have very good paying jobs. It's not like they send $3.5 billion to Israel and then Israel sits there and goes, this is how we're going to spend the money. This is not like Gaza, where they get the money coming in from the Emirates, to pay people. And it's, comes in handbags, and then, they distribute it at $100 bills. That's not how it works. This aid to Israel is not really aid to Israel. It's aid to the United States economy, is what it is. Israel sells more ammunition, more military equipment, to other countries than the aid package it gets back in return, so to speak, from the United States. It's such
when you think about that too, that Israel is like a technological giant, but also like a military technological giant. And just think about it. Like I mentioned, the Parsha B'Shalach, that it was the parting of the sea, and we crossed. And he said that in the days of Mashiach should come soon, or these are the days of the redemption. We see miracles, open miracles, I think anyone who pays attention to modern day Jewish history will have to agree that 3 years after Auschwitz, the state of Israel comes into being, and with the Jewish people who were so powerless, and 6 million Jews murdered and butchered and burnt, used as lampshades and everything, that they become such a power in the world and exporting military technology that no one could compare to what Israel offers in that regard. That is a clear, vivid miracle in our day, that if you told someone before the proclamation of the state of Israel in 48, just before that, that this is what Israel is going to be 2022, they would look at you and think that you need to take your pills. You need to take your medication. How does that make sense? They would just think, I hope the state survives. But I mean, this is unbelievable.
This was built out of necessity. It was built out of sheer need. There was no other choice. And I was mentioned when I came onto the show, that I was just watching a football game, and I was watching the playoffs, and it was, literally a game of inches. And same with the Jewish people. It was a game of inches, whether we were going to have a state and we were not going to have the state. And it was about who was willing to fight for those inches, who was willing to die for those inches, who was willing to sacrifice themselves
But more than
friend.
just that, not just a survival game, but to become number one.
And I was going to say, and out of that grew a nation that today, is the envy of the world. And it grew because of that willingness to fight for each other, to unite together, to fight for that inch together, to have that resolve that never again, that we're going to build a nation once and for all that's going to be strong and united, and that never again are we going to be left to wander the world. I mean, that's really the miracle of the Jewish state. I agree, the technology and everything else. But the real miracle of the modern state of Israel is that, never again, will we be dispersed around the world. No matter what our enemies want for us, it will never happen again. And that's why I always tell you, Meir, I don't fear for the, survival of the state of Israel. I fear for the people in the diaspora, and, and what we do and how we defend and protect ourselves as proud Jews in the diaspora, and how do we support and protect the state of Israel in the diaspora. Those are the things that, that I stay up at night and worry about. How do we make sure that an event like happened in the synagogue doesn't happen in our communities? What are we doing as a community? What are we doing as a leadership? What's happening in Toronto outside of the United Federation? The Toronto Federation sending out, an email to everybody saying how shocked they are, and they've talked to the police, and what actually are they doing? Who are they monitoring? How do we know that we are safe? Those are the things that we need to make sure as a community that we ask and that we demand now of our leadership more than ever before. And if 100%. We demand these things, those things will happen. I know we're running late here, so I'll stop right there.
Okay, look, terrific show. We covered a lot. And everyone who's watching, I've said it before, Jewish leadership meeting with high-profile Islamic organizations that embrace pretty much what we were talking about. No, or we expect more from our Jewish leadership. You can't meet with people that are justifying the BDS, and we gave the examples already, and we had the founder of BDS on defining what it means to be Jewish, and how far though he will allow Jews to go. It's anti-Semitism, and no. If it means, I'll tell you who we should be embracing as friends: those who support Israel. There are lots of Christian organizations out there they support.
Absolutely.
We need to be on great friendly terms with them. Don't start rolling out the welcome mat for these Islamic leaders who embrace the BDS. That's insanity. Forget it. And I've been critical of Rabbi Korupkin from the Bayat and the president of the Bayat synagogue as well, that calling on the Jewish community to meet with these Islamic leaders. It makes no sense. It doesn't help the Jewish community. Meet with Christian leaders who support Israel and strengthen that bond and give the signal to the Jewish community. These are people to be friends with, not those who embrace the BDS. No, what you're doing when you embrace these Islamic leaders who embrace the BDS, you are sanitizing Jewish members of the BDS that form groups like Jewish Voice for Peace and If Not Now, et cetera, who say Kaddish for Hamas terrorists. It can't be. We can't do that. And Bernie Farber needs to apologize to the Jewish community. Absolutely. There's no question about it. Needs to do it. Needs to do it fast. And like I said at the start of the show, that there have been some Jews who are involved with the BDS, unfortunately, that are now reaching out to me, and they want to turn a new leaf in their lives, and they're informing on the BDS organizations that they're part of. We welcome it. Bring more in. It's all confidential, no problem. And because we are working for the dismantlement of the BDS, of anti-Semitism. That's our goal. That's why we have this program. That's why we're active. We confront anti-Semitism. We confront the BDS. You want to help? Help us get the information. Also, go on to our website. We need the funds. Go on the website, israelnow.ca. Make a contribution, small, medium, large, anything. What that allows us to do, one immediate thing, is that we can promote our information on social media. We could pay for it to be promoted on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. Your contributions will go a long way. We'll reach a lot more people, have a stronger effect. And that's what you want, because there's no leadership here. See, Joe, what are they doing? They share a platform with a representative of the BDS pro-Intifada independent Jewish voices to discuss anti-Semitism, to see who's right or wrong. It's ridiculous. And Bernie Farber thinks a wonderful thing that CJA, Noah Shack from CJA, joined the panel with whatever her name is from the independent Jewish voices. It's ridiculous. It's not good for the Jewish community at all. It's not good.
And independent Jewish voices couldn't even come out and use the word anti-Semitism when they condemned what was happening. They said nobody should fear for their safety.
Right.
Everybody else called it out in the Jewish community for what it is. They still had a hard time, coming out and calling what happened anti-Semitism, because then that goes completely against their entire, understanding or their entire influence of what they think.
Poor little Muslim terrorists from Pakistan that took the Jews hostage in the synagogue. Oh, just ridiculous.
A mentally ill person who by mistake
mentally ill.
He
needs help. Let's help him. He didn't take his pills.
Yeah, exactly.
But he
all right, Meir.
Plan his flight and everything else. Yeah. Ron, thanks very much.
Thank you.
There's going to be a lot more, obviously, unfortunately, a lot more need for us to speak out, more programming, more exposure every day.
This is what we need. This is what we need. And the more that people will fund, this type of programming, the more that people will be willing to step up and help us out, the more that we can do, not just the show, the more influence we can have in other places. and the more reach we can have, and the more different types of programming that we can do. So I would urge everybody, to, $5 goes a long way. 1,000 people giving $5 goes a long way to what we've done. And $5 for most people is a coffee in the morning. So just think about that as a donation. Today is Tu B'Shvat, maybe 18. A chai would be nice.
Man.
Maybe a tree in Israel, and then $18 to Israel now would be a nice contribution. Whatever you can do, Meir does this, and for no fee whatsoever. The doctor back, in the background does this absolutely, for no fee at all. Nobody here gets paid for what we do, and I can assure you that any dollar that would come into the organization would go directly to enhance the programming and to give us more opportunities to reach out further and to do much more program than what we're currently doing. And I know that Meir would be very transparent and forthcoming on the donations and how they're utilized and spent. So please do support Meir and the doctor here and Israel Now. This is a great platform, and it's always a pleasure to be a guest on the show.
Thanks very much. Well said. We have a song.
We do have a song, and Ron, stick around because we have two songs. I'm going to click you out so we have room to put the song in. I just wanted to make two quick commentaries. I'm more of a visual person than a speaking person. So the first is, we all are sincerely, this is no joke, upset with progressive Jews. I think the problem is the marketing campaign from BDS and from the Palestinians is so much more well-financed than ours. And, just the commentary is we all feel bad for young children dying in Gaza. But what they need to appreciate, we need to market, it's not our fault. We're not the ones killing them. It's Hamas. And until we can get that message out, and this is meant as satire, not as comedy, but, the Hamas officials, they bring their children to Israel hospitals. They live in mansions. They fly Learjets. And this is what the progressive Jews either don't know, don't appreciate, or don't believe. So another commentary is that I'll just give them a little land. We've been giving them a little land, since around 1948, 1967, 1973, and on and on. And this is really what they want. All they want is a little land. Well, this is Israel. I think that the Arab world has quite enough land. So my last commentary before I play a song is you were talking a little bit earlier about the concept of a one state or a two state. I think it's time you'll realize we've been trying that land for peace. It just doesn't work. And the sooner that we as Jews appreciate that, the better chance of Israel surviving as a Jewish state. So on that note, let's play a song.
הבאנו שלום, הבאנו שלום, הבאנו שלום. Shalom, shalom.
One more quick comment before 1.5 more minutes of a song for Ron before you go to dinner. Just to talk about the one state, the two state, the reality situation is I have a solution and it's worked and let's just keep it. And here it is. The 3-state solution. Egypt, Israel, Jordan, and 4 states. Let's have Lebanon join as a 4th state in our consortium. It would be really nice in the future for the Syrian people to realize that the government doesn't care about them, but we do. So let's play one more song, and Ron's favorite and all of our favorites.
Which one? Oh, yes, we got to stand for this one. עם ישראל חי. עם ישראל חי.
יעשה שלום עלינו